Stephanie White just threw away another game the Indiana Fever should have won, and her decisions in the final minutes will leave you furious. She's dragging down Caitlin Clark's legacy with every mistake, and it's becoming clearer each night that she has no clue what she's doing on the sidelines. While others keep covering for her, I'm here to lay it out plainly. Stephanie White is the worst possible coach for this team, and Fever fans should be demanding her removal immediately.
And the Dallas Wings looked pretty salty last night, and they knock off the Indiana Fever. And I'm just keeping it real. They're building a UConn-type roster in Dallas.
Let me break down exactly what Stephanie White pulled against Dallas and why it proves she's absolutely clueless. Just one night earlier, the Fever looked sharp. Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham took on the ball handling, the offense, flowed beautifully, and Indiana dominated. Everything clicked. So what does White do the very next game? She scraps the whole plan and hands the reins to Odyssey Sims, a player who hadn't been on a roster all year. White gave her 13 minutes of floor time, and the results were exactly what you'd expect. 4 missed shots, sloppy turnovers, and a -4 rating. Out of shape, unprepared, and completely ineffective. Meanwhile, their best defender, Lexi Hull, sat on the bench watching the mess unfold. That's Stephanie White in a nutshell. She finds something that works, then abandons it just to prove how smart she thinks she is. Winning with what's effective isn't enough for her. She'd rather lose on her terms. Afterward, she stood at the podium talking about attention to detail and uncharacteristic turnovers. But let's be honest, this wasn't on the players. She put an unready Sims on the court and benched her strongest defender. And just like always, she refused to take any responsibility. His is the same story from her track record. 5 years at Vanderbilt with a 46-83 record, always shifting blame to her players. At UConn, gone in 2 seasons, and now in Indiana. It's the same old playbook: excuses, deflection, and disastrous decisions. The Sims experiment wasn't just a mistake. It was a complete exposure of White's inability to coach at this level. Players play. She's like that micromanaging boss who refuses to let anyone succeed unless it's done exactly her way. And when it all collapses, somehow it's never her fault. The real proof of White's bad judgment shows up in her lineup choices. Look at who she plays, and more importantly, who she benches. Lexi Hull, their best perimeter defender, constantly gets pulled in and out of rotations with no explanation. This is a player who can guard anyone, make smart decisions, and when her confidence is up, actually provide quality offense. Yet White treats her like an afterthought, and it's killing the Fever. When Lexi Hull is confident, she's unstoppable. But instead of recognizing her as a Dennis Rodman-type player who changes games in ways the box score can't measure, Stephanie White treats her like a fringe player begging for minutes. Meanwhile, she keeps handing opportunities to players who don't fit what this team actually needs, including some who've shown open hostility toward Caitlin Clark. And then people wonder why the chemistry looks broken. The truth is, the only veteran consistently standing up for Clark is Sophie Cunningham. She's the one who gets physical when opponents target their star, the one who makes it clear there are consequences for disrespecting the Fever's franchise player. But instead of building around players who protect and elevate Clark, White makes roster moves and rotation decisions that feel more about proving her own point than actually winning games. And that's what should terrify Fever fans. Stephanie White is systematically coaching the greatness out of Caitlin Clark. Just listen to Clark herself. In a recent interview, she admitted White pulls her from games for taking risks with her, passing, to the point where Clark laughed about not even attempting plays she used to make. That's insane. You're talking about a player who revolutionized college basketball with logo threes and impossible passes, and now her coach is scaring her into becoming a cautious, boring point guard. That's like telling Stephen Curry to quit shooting from deep because it's a low percentage shot. It's backwards, it's damaging, and it's proof that White has no idea how to maximize generational talent. Those so-called risky passes aren't mistakes. They're the very plays that make Caitlin Clark a once-in-a-generation star. But Stephanie White is so fixated on her outdated system that she's willing to strip away Clark's brilliance just to make her own coaching job easier. The sad part? Clark genuinely respects White and is buying into this process. She's being conditioned to believe that playing it safe is better than being revolutionary, and that's a tragedy for both her and the Fever. Every single game, White makes rotation decisions that defy all logic. She yanks players who are hot, leaves ice-cold players in during crunch time, and shows zero feel for the actual flow of the game. The Dallas matchup was peak White incompetence. Lexi Hull, their best plus-minus player that night, was shutting down scorers and making smart plays. Yet because White wanted to force-feed minutes to her new toy Odyssey Sims, Hull got stuck on the bench. When Hull finally checked back in and matched up against Paige Buchers in the fourth, she completely locked her down. That defensive stop should have been the blueprint, but White ignored it. Instead, her bad substitutions killed momentum. The Fever stormed back from 17 down to within a single point, and still, White's choices sabotaged the comeback. Her timeout management is just as bad, either burning them at the worst possible times or holding them when the team desperately needs a reset. She coaches like someone who has no pulse for the game, no instincts, and frankly, no resume that backs up her position. Let's stop pretending. At Vanderbilt, White was a disaster. 46-83 over 5 years. That's not a fluke. That's a pattern of failure. And now, Indiana is living through it all over again. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern of failure. At UConn, they gave Stephanie White 2 seasons before moving on. At Vanderbilt, 5 years of losing basketball. Now in Indiana, her third shot at proving she can actually coach, we're seeing the exact same issues that got her run out everywhere else. White carries herself like she's the smartest person in the room, but her track record screams otherwise. She's an average coach who keeps getting opportunities she hasn't earned. And here's the real problem. The Fever front office knew all of this before they hired her. They saw the ugly Vanderbilt record. They saw the short-lived UConn stint. Yet they still handed her the keys to Caitlin Clark's future. And that's unforgivable. Indiana needs to make a move now, before Stephanie White completely wastes Clark's prime. She's had 3 different chances to prove she belongs. At this level, and every stop has ended the same way. Excuses, stubbornness, and failure. Clark can't just sit back and trust the process, when the process is designed to make her ordinary instead of extraordinary. The Fever already have the pieces: Hull, Cunningham, Mitchell, Boston. That's a championship core with Clark healthy. But they need a coach who knows how to maximize talent, not force square pegs into round holes. Right now, White is coaching like it's still 1995, trying to jam modern stars into an outdated system that just doesn't work. If Indiana doesn't act soon, don't be surprised if Clark starts questioning her future. No superstar wants to waste their career playing for a coach who doesn't recognize greatness. White has had multiple chances, multiple teams, and the results never change. It's time for the Fever to admit they made a mistake and find someone who can unlock the full potential of this roster before it's too late. The clock is ticking. Every game White coaches is another wasted opportunity for the most important player in women's basketball history.